So for teaching for sustainability, my latest video is with Juliet Nolan. Juliet, can you just please introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, yes, my name's Juliet. I'm a primary school teacher from London and I've recently written a picture book, which is what we're going to talk about today.
We are, because I was sent a preview copy, and I have to say, I've seen lots of children's books, but this one's different. This one's right up my street, absolutely. It's called The Salmon and the Tomato. It's not very in focus. There we go, Salmon and the Tomato. It's beautifully illustrated. And so we're just going to have a little bit of a discussion today about this book particular, but also storytelling for schools. Can you please just outline what this book's about and what inspired you to write it?
So The Salmon and the Tomato is a picture book that straddles fiction and non-fiction. So it's a story, but it's about complex real life issues. It traces the hidden links between so many problems that we face in the world at the moment, from overfishing in West Africa, migration from Africa to Spain, the greenhouse vegetable industry in Spain producing year-round vegetables, excessive water use there, and also animal welfare issues in Scotland and Norway for farmed salmon. Now, none of that litany of problems I've just gone through seem like classic subjects for a children's book. But I hope you would agree, Meryl, I think we've made this into a warm, quite empathetic story that is easy for children to use with children. Shall I talk a little bit about the story itself, or?
Yeah, because you've just given the outline there, and this is, the food systems we've got are hugely complicated, and I don't think I'm wrong in saying slightly broken in terms of animal welfare and things. So yeah, please, what inspired you? What sort of gave you that trigger?
Well, I came to this project for animal welfare issues, I guess, but I stayed with it for human welfare issues because of the interconnectedness of all these problems. I could backtrack a little bit actually and say that the way the story works, we start with a little boy and his granny in Scotland who are eating a salmon and a tomato as part of their meal. And when the granny explains that most of the farmed salmon are fed on pellets made from wild fish, the story then flies off to Senegal, where we meet a little boy there. In his village, all the men fish, all the women work in artisan fish processing facilities, and all the villagers eat fish every night, except that now that the fish is being taken to feed the farmed salmon in Scotland, the seas in West Africa are empty. No fish, no work, no food. And so the young people are often forced to migrate. We see the little boy's older brother migrating, the dangerous journey to Spain, and that brings in the tomato in the title story. Many of the migrants there find work in the greenhouse industry and are stuck in really quite unpleasant situation often.
They really, those, I think, if you look at an aerial shot of Almeria and things, it's literally a sea of plastic, hot greenhouses, and these migrant workers are not, looked after well. I think, so
Right.
when we buy a tomato or buy a lettuce and it says grown in Spain, that doesn't tell the story behind that. So no, I mean,
No.
and these are difficult concepts to understand, but we should understand where the food on our plate comes from. I'm getting rather mighty sick of seeing bucolic farms and wild salmon swimming and people with a fishing line. It just isn't like that. We buy our food in plastic trays from the supermarket, and no one, really is asking those questions about how it got there, welfare of animals, welfare of people, environmental consequences. So no, your book is beautiful, and it's beautifully illustrated, and it just allows discussions to take place.
Mm.
So, you one of the things that really stuck out with me, and I don't often use it as a term, was this metaphor of the big machine for the global food industry. And so, by breaking it down, it makes sense in the book. But it's a why? What was your driver behind that? Sort of making it this sort of like, not a character, but an idea in there. Go ahead.
Actually, in a way, I do think of the big machine as a character. I wanted a simple, striking concept that would quickly cover those issues without, in the space of a picture book, going into colonialism, capitalism, extractivism, all the huge sort of dehumanizing scale of the global food system. To be honest, not just to help children understand it. I'm probably not the only grown up that really doesn't understand all the politics behind the food on my plate. So it felt a useful idea. I needed a villain for the book, but something not too scary. So that's the concept of the big machine. I think children instinctively grasp the idea of a machine with many moving parts, inputs, outputs. With a very young child, you could leave it as that. With the older children, it is quite interesting to start saying, do you think the writers really mean a machine? Or what do you think they mean here? We've already had some quite really rich discussions with sort of the older junior children along those lines. So yeah, I think it was just a useful way to
It
cover
works.
what's
It
going on.
it
Yeah.
does. And as you say, you can start unpicking it in more detail in the classroom. I love those books that sort of inspire conversations. So out of all of the food on our plates, why you could have chosen any culinary ingredients. Why the salmon and tomato specifically? What was the draw on that?
Well, in a way, that takes you back to your earlier part of your question, what inspired me to write this book? So this book is, well, it's a collaboration, first of all, wasn't my idea originally. It has been born from a wider project, the brainchild of my co-author, Neil Hadaway. Now, Neil is a conservation biologist turned investigative journalist and drone photographer. So he had been working on global food supply chains, also tinkering with his hobby of drone photography, and had stumbled across both the enormous sea of plastic greenhouses you were talking about, Meryl. I think it's 32,000 hectares. Quite hard to see when you're in Spain, sort of on foot yourself. But if you look at Google Maps, you can see them. And he'd also been photographing the salmon farms in Scotland. So his project was there. That's the other thing that really attracted me to the whole concept of what he was trying to convey was that how evidence-based this is. This is a research project he's been working on for several years. And when he explained it to me, we realized together that with my skills, before I became a teacher, I worked in children's publishing as an editor, an illustrator, an author occasionally. So we both brought different skills to it, but that I could help translate his evidence-based research into something that we could maybe grasp very quickly. Initially, it wasn't really meant for, we didn't necessarily think we were going to produce something that children would use. We thought it would be an interesting artifact that we could persuade politicians to amend policy. It was only when we'd really written it, the illustrations were there, we realized that this is too good not to share. And we wanted to get it in the hands of
It
teachers and
really
therefore children.
it really is. It's I think it's going to have a slightly profound effect because I talk, with the Ministry of Eco Education, I talk about, should we go vegan? What's on our plates? We do. I've done workshops about, milks and different types of plant milk. But food is fundamental to being human. And sharing food and discussing food. And so even if it just leads to those conversations around the dinner table, is this farm salmon? Is this not farm salmon? What's the difference? And how, so you mentioned Neil Hadaway. It was a wider collaboration again, though. So who else was involved?
So I've got a lovely illustrator from Brazil called Marilia. And we were very keen to make sure that obviously Neil and I are both based in the UK. And even though his project is very rigorously researched, we wanted to really make sure we were getting everything accurate and portraying different stories from different places well. So we have a consultant from the Gambia, a human rights defender, who was really helping us to does this check out? Is this, a good representation of a family in the Senegal or the Gambia? He himself had had family members who'd made this journey by boat. So that was really, it was really moving listening to his view. And we're very proud actually that the book's been endorsed by Greenpeace Africa, who said it aligns very strongly with the projects they've been doing on marine issues in West Africa. So that's the team really.
So for me, I think that, yeah, it's powerful. It makes it more powerful. These are real people talking about real stories that are happening, and it's evidence based. And I think possibly it's because of my scientific background, but I love that. I think there's a real, market for children's books that have that, real life stories, but backed up with the evidence. As I say, it's no time for bucolic farms and, old MacDonald anymore. We need to talk about these things seriously. I'm not saying we can't have imagination and imagine a better world, but these books could, this book particularly could help us, you know, understand where we're at so that then we can re-envisage something better, and have those and have that dialogue. So um, this book could lead to real, excellent discussions and big thinking about, by children about the food and about migration. Um, what can they do about it? You've got some ideas in the book. Can you just describe some of those? Because that's what I thought when I finished it. I was like, "There's more." Go ahead.
Well, I think we'll all agree as teachers, we are so time poor. There is nothing better than having some ideas ready, thought out for you. Even if you reject them, they often help you jump off to something else, don't they? So for me as a teacher, it was really, really important that I could just throw out some ideas. That's all they are. They're not lesson plans because I think the most useful thing is to have a nugget of an idea. So there are 8 activities that you could use with children of different ages. Some are art, some are poetry, some are writing, or some are research based. Some are just questions to get you thinking about. They range from cooking to fashion, even. Can you make a catwalk in your class based on the Senegalese, the beautiful fabric patterns?
Fabrics.
So they're not all directly related to the sort of messages of the book, but they are jumping off points to help you um, with your class do an activity and maybe continue the discussions you might be having prompted on the story. I often think that's the best way when you're dealing with really big issues like the book. Um, on the website, because that's the other thing, a teacher who's interested but might be slightly concerned, how factually accurate is this? Not only have we got explanatory notes in the book, but it also links to the website to the wider project, the salmonandthetomato.org. And there's every fact and figure you might need to be really reassured. There we've put a list of actions for a consumer, for a producer in the food supply chain, or even for a politician. But in the book itself, which is bringing me back to your question, I think, Meryl, what can a child do? And what can a teacher do? What can one's class do? We didn't want to be too didactic. We didn't want to be preachy. I'm vegan, as is Neil, but we don't say that in the book. I think that would be counterproductive, and it's not for everybody. If I'm honest, my main takeaway, I would love if more people ate less farmed salmon. And I think that is doable. I think the animal welfare issues are so extreme at the moment that that's a humane sort of request. Other people have read the book and said, "Oh, I should eat more locally, more seasonally," which is, of course, sustainably speaking, you and I would think that's a great thing to do. On the other hand, if we all did that overnight, the migrant workers who do end up in Spain, they do really need that job. So these are not easy fixes. And also as a child, I think it is really important they have so little agency. All of us as consumers, we have little agency. Really, we want our politicians to change things. The very ending of the book shows the main character writing a letter to his local politician. Now, if every reader of this book did that, that would be great, wouldn't it? I think you're right, Meryl. If we have an
Would it? Would it?
uprising of children writing
It
to
would
their MPs,
improve, yeah, it would improve their communication skills, their writing skills, give them something they could be passionate about. Absolutely, totally behind
yeah,
that. So yeah, and I think that's so important that story time for children can be so much more than just a story and an escape. It can lead to exciting projects and ideas that you can explore together. Um, so can we expect more? Because not only is there every single different type of food that we eat, and some is good and some is not so good, but there's also other things about the big machine that which are different industries. Can we expect more books to come out, Juliet?
Big Machine series. Now you'll give me an idea. Well, who knows?
I've
Yes,
got one
anyone has
about
any?
I've got one about the education system as the big machine.
We're feeding children in, and what are we getting out the other end?
They all come out the
Okay,
same.
everyone, watch this space. And if you out there have other ideas, send them in. Yeah, who knows? But
Fantastic.
this project itself is going in lots of different directions. Someone in France is turning it into a play. It's, I think it will have a life of its own, slowly developing. And most of all, what we'd really like to collect is an online gallery of children's responses to keep inspiring others. So if you are out there listening and think, I'd quite like to use this book, well, for a start, always reach out to me if you want any help or advice in any way. But if you do it and your children produce some work, then do send some photos in. It
And
would be wonderful to see.
they can access a copy via the website, don't they?
Yes, yeah,
salmonandtomato.org.
that's right.
So, and I mean, I know as a matter of fact that the Ministry of Eco Education is funded by the Green Britain Foundation, which receives most of its funding from Dale Vince. And Dale Vince is a really strong proponent for stopping salmon farming. So this would be right up his street. I think he's got grandchildren. I might recommend it. So because storytelling is a powerful tool, but you know, is that it? Is that it? Storytelling is a powerful tool for teaching children about environmental and social issues. But why? Why is it? Historically, generations, millennia. But what about it? What about storytelling for you? Why is it so important?
I think storytelling is a powerful tool for teaching any topic, actually, not just environmental and social concerns. I think there's some kind of magic happens, doesn't it, when as a teacher when you use a good book. Um, Maybe it is the simple storylines that lend themselves to being this safe springboard for discussion. Or maybe it's just the familiar structure, the safeness of sharing a story, which has the added benefit, I think, if you're touching on any potentially thorny issues, that you're in a ready-made setup to be able to mediate that as a teacher, to see the effect on the children and to talk through any possible concerns. I do think that's one of our roles as a teacher, actually, to mediate these issues with our children. And what better way than through a story? Maybe it's just the very lack of words leaves spaces for children's questions to grow. Um, Maybe it's that. Um,
Yeah. So, because I mean, what would be ideal is this is perfect for primary schools, key stage 1 and key stage 2. But I'm looking at it with we have to do about healthy diets and things in key stage 3, and I always turn that to healthy diet for a healthy planet because there's no such thing as a healthy diet for a human, which isn't health, shouldn't also be healthy for a. So I'm now thinking about how we can stretch and challenge, develop the next, another. But that
You're so
storytelling is.
right, though.
Yeah.
You're so right, Mel. I think actually, I think this book does work for older children as well. It's quite a rare thing, isn't it? It's a really useful thing to have a book that touches on grown-up issues, but without an overwhelming amount of text.
Yep.
So actually, I would use this with an older child, either top juniors with lower reading ability or even beyond, just as a jumping off point.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
only takes it's a 10-minute read, so you could read it as a starter in a lesson about food and because food security, however we look at it, is going to be a growing issue as the climate crisis escalates, and our food industry currently is not great for our planet. From everything from palm oil, we could do loads. Juliet, I'm thinking about a series, honestly. um, I think honestly, it's wonderful. If you could give one tip as a go away, except for obviously buying the book and getting a copy and using the tools in there, what other one more tip for teachers before we depart?
Oh, I think we are so amazing teachers, aren't we? And working with scientists on this project has made me realize that the thing we do all the time with every good lesson, they think is magical. But we are, I think, well, we need a hook, don't we, for a lesson? And then we need to be able to break it down into small steps and we need to communicate it and we need to enthuse people. We do that all the time. I don't know if I'm the only one. I thought that was just what everybody does, but I think it's what teachers do. So my tip would be that's our superpower. Let's keep using it. And I just happened to end up writing this book. What will you do? Let's use our superpower.
Absolutely, and mine definitely. I call myself a climate communicator or a climate educator now, and it's because I'm a teacher that I can try and take these complex ideas, that big machine mentality, and try and break it down to make it understandable for for the children in classrooms. So no, I love that. Absolutely, we have a superpower, Juliet. Whoosh. It's been a real joy. I love this book. As I say, it's called The Salmon and Tomato. Um, by Juliet Nolan and Neil Hadaway, and beautifully illustrated. I'm not going to show you all the pictures. You'll have to get a copy yourselves, listeners. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to end it here, but there we go.